I don't think you're going to have it that easy because our next guests, they're going to fight back right now, right now. So sit down because you have it coming. And Miguel Carvalho is going to conduct the next panel, our last panel. So we'll invite to the stage Maria José Campos, Maria João Carioca, Sérgio Santos, João Dias. Miguel will take it from here. Thank you very much.
Queres água? Queres água? Tu queres água, não é? Queres água?
Quero água sim, Miguel.
Passo pelo Francisco.
Well, good afternoon. We are the one before the last, so it's a very demanding to keep you alive and interesting in the subject. And just a short note, Francisco Barbera and gently, kindly asked Sérgio to replace him. They had a problem at the elevator of the bank, so we have to be very cautious when we say that he had a problem at the bank. We cannot say that, he had a problem with that. But this is a public thing, he was not able to be here, and he asked Sérgio to represent him. And we already presented who is with us. I would like to start by saying three things. First, every time that I came to data science, data-driven, there are two industries that are always subject to demo explanation. One is healthcare, the other one is banking. Today, and of course, and there are others that are coming in and out, but banking and healthcare are always present at those demos. Today, I had the confirmation banking is still very important because Professor Nadim mentioned 5 times banking. So whenever you have to mention 5 times to give an example, it's because you need them and we use them. And this is what we want to discuss today is how we are reinventing banking, and my panel will discuss what are we doing and what is the perspectives of the banking. Second, and I think it's also very important, is that when we attend the presentation from Closer, data science and data-driven and analytics applied to industries is different ways of doing the same thing. Is how to build products and listen to customers differently, how to design, how to distribute. So we are using data to help us on doing our core business. In banking, what I've perceived, that's my opinion, I'm going to challenge the panel, it's changing what we do. So when we are in an environment of cashless, cardless, branchless, and even human risk analysis and all the subjects that we've been doing for banking, this is reinventing banking. So banking has a challenge to reinvent. Third, and not the last, and probably the most important, as you can see from the panel, the leading people that are now reinventing the banking and bringing that data-centric on banking is people that are fully business focused. I know them all, unless Sérgio not as well, but at least Barbera know. And first time now we have bankings addressing data and IT and technology with the business insights, with the business focus, and how can we use it in order to create the service that banks are serving. So this is a huge change in that perspective. I would like to divide the debate in two. One is the thing that we already do today. What are the bankings doing right now? We use a lot of data, and banks are using a lot of data scientists, and they have been applying a lot of things, probably to protect more than to develop new business. And then a second part of the debate will be what's next, what's the future? Opening for questions in the end, because I think it's always nice to have some challenge and some feedback from the audience in order to grab this opportunity to understand what bankings are preparing and what they're doing. Well, having said that, we have here the top, or almost the leading banks in Portugal, and that we all know, BCP, Millennium, Caixa, BPI, and Novo Banco. I would like to challenge them to address what are your opinions and what are the challenges that we live on a day-to-day basis when it comes to become a data-centric company, and what are the challenges that we are addressing in order to protect the bank. I don't know, Maria José, if you want to kick session now.
All right, so maybe I start with a story that actually have already a couple of years, I mean even 5 years, but it's interesting in the way it shows some of the challenges that we have and then pass to how we are addressing them. So I've been actually in Millennium, but during the last 17 years I was in our operation in Poland. And there we had models for pre-approved consumer lending. We have propensity models also for consumer lending. And at the point we decide actually to leverage events, real-time events, in order to contact directly clients through the outbound channel and through the SMS channel to boost propensity and target the clients. So one day, one of those cold days in winter, a client receives a call from our contact center proposing a personal loan because we have detected an event where the balance suddenly dropped below a certain amount in the right period of the month versus the historical balance performance of the client. The client was a little bit surprised. He received an SMS as well. And during the call, when our agent was explaining him the proposal, he received also an SMS from our anti-fraud team, and this links back to what Ricardo was explaining, showing that do you really want to approve this third ATM withdraw transaction at the ATM? So of course the car was being schemed, and of course the client at the beginning was a bit upset, and then he also laughed with us, and we got a lesson that really, I think one of the problems that we really have versus what we saw just now is that we don't start with a white page. We have years of technology. We still have some silos to address and some processes that work in parallel. So I think one of our biggest challenges right now, and I'm sure most of the banks have put on top of their digital and IT transformation strategy, the investment on a new data architecture and data platform, is really to implement the data lake where all the information is consolidated and all the new open source tools to be able to tackle all these different use cases that we have to address at the same time in a correlated way. The second challenge, of course, is that we need to get the right talent, and for sure we are all building teams specialized on modeling and moving from what we used to do since many, many years, predictive modeling, to real-time predictive model, leveraging machine learning and all the open source tools.
Yeah. Is that something that we are in line with the other banks, or is it a challenge? Because I see the industry moving faster, but having to address the existing needs and what we have to do. It's because we have regulation. We can do only the profitable business. So how, João, you want to?
Yeah, I think it's to a large extent pretty well aligned. I think definitely our greatest challenge is also our greatest asset. We serve 4 million active clients in a country with 10 million inhabitants. So what does that do for us? You have to acknowledge that not every client with us, because they like the smart push notification at a given time of the day or with a given event. You have to be extra careful, you have to be extra mindful of how you thread the line that lets you go faster and more accurately to the business opportunity, and also how do you acknowledge the fact that not all of my clients are digital native, not all of my clients expect the same out of the bank, not all of my clients have joined the bank for the same purpose. So if you take that into consideration, that just adds a layer of responsibility and a layer of sophistication into every analysis that you run, into every mechanism that you put in place, into every technological piece you put in place to deal with all your data. The way we're dealing with it is inevitably, it's multi-pronged. You can't do this on a single layer. We're obviously pushing really hard to be closer to the business, to make sure that we're delivering better opportunities to our people, talking to our clients coming to us. And I have nearing on 1.6, 1.7 million active clients in my online and in my apps. They're coming to me. I mean, since DSP2 started last Friday and we had a hiccup because we've had 1 million customers come to us from them. Yep. So that's big. It's a lot of numbers. So what we're doing is we're deploying increasing analytical skills, as everybody is. We're doing it in a scale that's challenging because we have to make sure that we are multiplying ourselves across the very different needs that we get across these many segments, these many instances in which data would help us be there faster. We're doing it in a very open way. We're bringing in partners. We're doing it to a very large extent because we do understand that part of this being there for such a diverse customer base means understanding that the market out there is very different for these types of players. So in some market segments, in some ideas, in some opportunities, in some approaches to the market, partners are tremendous help. Actually, look out for us next Tuesday. You're going to be hearing about Caixa. There's something really great. It's something that in terms of the analytical motor engines behind it is really powerful, and we think it's going to be a refreshing breakthrough. We're doing that without forgetting that there are at least 2 layers of addressing data that are very important. And I won't take up too much space. I'll just leave these 2 hanging, and you'll decide whether or not you want to pick them up. One layer has to do with the less sexy part, if you like, the part of dealing with risk. So there's a big thread in our organization in the way we deal with data, and we've talked about it a lot here today. It goes really in depth into our systems, into our compliance, into the way we handle our credit management, into the way we handle our recovery. So the full cycle of risk management from the risk gathering data, data gathering, to the way we incorporate it into our management decisions. And that's a big thread as well. And then there's an element of what I call infrastructural, just putting it all in place. It's not just technology at all. I often get people to address me about what we're doing with the technological revamp of our IT, of our core systems. It's not just about that at all. There's an infrastructural element of governance as well that is fundamentally important to us. Data needs to be governed. Data needs to be accurate. Data needs to be dealt with in the organization in the way that's clear. Otherwise, if you're a relatively big organization, it's just not going to sort itself out. So 3-pronged approach, pretty classic, still very exciting for the simple reason that you are addressing such a tremendously diverse customer base that whichever way I turn, I see something that really turns me on.
Yeah. Is the same with the Banco BPI on the change that you have been doing also, or you see different perspectives from our address to customers and our governance?
I would say that our challenges are pretty much the same, but I would add that banks have been very good at building what I would call the information factory, in the sense that they've been trying to get data and trying to make the decision process regarding risk and all the decisions about credit allocation, portfolio management, etc. Trying to get this information out of people's heads and decisions and into to models so that they can be specifically and standardized, mixed and matched according to their to the needs. So banks have been trying to build this type of infrastructure for some time, and the type of data that you are now using allow us to do this in a different way. And I would say that banks, and this is the case for BPI, but I would say that this is all it's pretty much the same for the Portuguese banks and banks across Europe, is that banks have been investing a lot in the digitalization of all its process, either on the front facing with the customers, or on the front office, on the branches, or even on the back office. So there are a lot of digital processes that are pretty much ripe for putting the next layer in terms of the decision and the artificial intelligence and the robotization, because a lot of work has been done already in terms of digitizing a lot of the work. It's not done yet, but there is a fertile ground here in terms of all the digitalization that you have been doing in terms of your process and in terms of the way you interact and manage your customer information. So, there is not, as João mentioned, there is no one strategy for this. So there is a lot of layers that you need to work on this. There is the risk that will continue, and this is an hard job that will be getting harder. But also, banks have been better at managing risk and trying to avoid losses than trying to think data as an income opportunity. So I would say that this is one of the big challenges, trying to think of data not as a cost, as we all do in terms of our allocation in terms of budget. We tend to put data on the cost side, but try to look at this data and see what are the opportunities that with open banking and all the interfaces that you have. So the challenges are pretty much the same. I would say that the approaches are different across all these layers, but I think we're all very much committed in trying to get the opportunities that for the work that you have done in the past and for some of the challenges that the tools that you now have to work with them.
João, I don't think that, not asking the same thing, but do we still have time? Is that an issue? Can we just do it step by step, or there is an urgency not to be like Blockbuster when Netflix show up, or like Kodak when the digital? How we are addressing that?
No, look, I think there is time. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here serving as in Novo Banco. But we do need to hurry up. Look, there's an element. So if you bring this back to more kind of banking, digital banking strategy, and so on, there's something that we all need to be aware of, which is the banking industry comes with a great equity of trust and confidence and brand and so on in the market. A lot of that has been seriously challenged over the crisis. It's amazing that we still have that equity, but every study still shows us that we still have an advantage in comparison to other types of players when it comes to people trusting us with their money, with their data, with their relationships, etc. Now, my sense is that is eroding quickly. And so we needed to hurry, but I do believe there's still time. There's some things that we can do, and some things we can't, right? And if we compare ourselves, for example, with the previous presentation of Revolut, suddenly we can't recreate ourselves as, a completely cool, young, community-based Facebook thing company. Nobody would believe that, right? So there's a limit to how we can extend the brand and how we can stretch our personality. But on the other hand, when it comes to serving customers well, we can do that, and actually we can probably do better. I'll give you an example, right? And I think Maria João was touching on that. We do have a number of customers and an increasing segment of customers that wants to interact with us digitally. And for them, we are falling behind. We need to do a lot better when it comes to building our digital bank, making that complete, making that seamless, simple, etc. On the other hand, there's also a very important segment of the population, namely in a country like Portugal, right, where Joaquim, who is a factory worker in Guimarães, he knows Sr. Freitas at the branch. Right? And it's with Sr. Freitas that he wants to interact, right? A company like Revolut cannot match that because one, they don't know where Guimarães is, and two, they don't have a branch there, right? And so there's some equity that we can build on, right? Now, having said that, we do have a number of things pulling us down. I think you mentioned some, and now going back to data, when you talk about some of the legacy data we have and how difficult it is to keep it clean and how important it is to have data governance and data quality efforts and so on. For sure, that's the case. But we do have a lot going for us. People already mentioned we have in Novo Banco hundreds of models for everything ranging from credit risk to capital to impairments, KYC, AML, etc., propensity models, etc. We are, of course, not new to machine learning. We are starting already with a number of machine learning use cases, namely for, again, propensity models, talking to customers when it's relevant for them, etc. And we are currently, rapidly increasing the number of variables we use. We heard today talking a lot about feature engineering and so on. Is of course something we're doing, which basically brings us from models that are in the tens of variables to models where we can literally mix in hundreds and hundreds of variables into different features and see what comes out better, and we can automate that, and we have computing power to do that. And so we have a lot going for us. Now, the question is, do you see this as the glass 5% full or the glass 95% empty, right? And that's pretty much where we are at this point, right? Lots to do.
I'm not being, as Aziz, not being old, I'm still the times that the SLAs and the uptimes and having the bank open in the morning was a challenge. I still remember those days when we get to 8:30 and the bank was not ready. Now things change. I don't know, what is the drivers, what are the KPIs now? How can we measure the quality of data? How can we measure the impact? I think what concerns you the most in terms of managing this data? What are the KPIs when it comes to the data-centric kind of?
So, first of all, I think regulation, contrary to what sometimes is conveyed, actually has been an advantage for banking in this area. We all have to be compatible with BCBS 239, which establish the need for very strong controls on data quality and end-to-end data lineage. And so we have really, I believe, a competitive advantage in the amount and variety of data we have today. That is not only the transactional data, but also the digital data due to this shift, this huge shift and accelerated shift we are seeing to the digital. And in addition, because we have to work in a very structured way on the quality of data. Besides, we all have been doing investments on the infrastructure, and here I believe that, of course, it's not only about technology. Talent is very important. It's not only about data scientists. Business translators are fundamental, but I still believe in the traditional banking, a change in technology is really important. Now, what the good news are that this is not what used to be some years ago, that it to be something requiring a huge investment, a huge time of implementation, a lot of risk. Now we can actually apply things in a phased approach and apply not from a technical perspective, but apply from a business use case, get success, and then reapply to other domains. So today we have very strong controls on the data quality in different domains, not only on the risk data, also on the customer data, but coming back to the way we are using data for new and more innovative cases. This quality of data, what allows us is really to be able to transform the experience we are giving to our clients in a way that is differentiates and not giving the same experience to everyone. So even if we have, it's true, a very different customer base and people with different age and different behaviors and different needs, the beauty of this, in my opinion, is that now we can have behavior segmentation and not the old traditional demographic or segmentation based on assets, and we can apply to very different groups of people, very different propositions and even digital experiences that will benefit and create loyalty for people that are very, very different from the farmer that still goes to the branch but from time to time already logs in to see the balance to the one that does everything, even buying tickets through the mobile phone.
Yeah. I agree. I think that Professor Nadim was a little bit extra in terms of we don't want to be cold. I think that people want to be challenged sometimes, and depending on the concept. But you think that we are observing a different in mindset of millennials, or we are always looking to millennials differently? Is that an issue at Caixa, for instance, or it's just an age?
It's not really an issue. I mean, we do observe different types of behaviors. We do understand ourselves that sometimes the way we read our customers' behaviors is in itself evolving. Sometimes we believe our clients need something, and then we figure out that there's a second layer, there's a more sophisticated look into what the client is actually asking of us, and we need to go there. You asked a pretty tough question just now, which was what is the KPI for what it is we're doing with data? And I'm getting back to it precisely because I don't know the answer. But it's a really interesting question because, if I'm just looking at my chief data officer and he's grinning right now, but sometimes we have these discussions about how things are going and how is my analytics lab delivering and how is the business taking on what's coming out of it and how is it actually incorporating value into what other types of analytics the business was already using, etc. And we do struggle with what is a KPI. I tend to go back to customer satisfaction, so I was kind of looking around the room to see if Nadim was still around, because I'm not sure I could take his fast-paced sarcasm on the fact that I'm actually asking my customers what they think I'm doing, whether it's okay, whether they like it or not. But we do go back to whether or not customers are happy with what we're doing with the data they're giving us. We do go back to asking our clients a lot what it is that we're doing. We had this fantastic experience with the way we designed our app. We embedded the customer feedback into the user experience. We're getting like 10 times more feedback from our clients than we used to on what is, the normal profile. And that is what we've been feeding into our development loop. That's what we're feeding into the next thing we're going to offer you. That's what we're feeding into our partners in designing next thing. So I got Nadim's point. It's such a shady KPI, right? Customer satisfaction. But then again, if we don't understand that there's an element of additional sophistication that we also need to gather in asking clients, are you okay with what we're doing with your data? Is this what you actually expected us to do with your data when you gave it to us 20 years ago? Did you have any notion that we were going to be doing this? Did you know that when you gave us your grandkids' data, we were actually going to use it to tell you that now that you're a grandparent, you can enjoy a quiet holiday? A couple of months ago, I saw this paper by one of the sponsors here, and it had some pretty interesting insights on data, but the one insight I got out of it was a full page that had nothing but a pretty, a really pretty lady saying silence is gold. We have not incorporated into a lot of our data analysis, into a lot of our data knowledge, into a lot of our data thinking, the fact that often we do not yet know when to shut up. We're kind of like teenagers where data is concerned. We just found out about it. It's fantastic. Everybody talks about it. Everybody's doing something with it. Actually, it just came to mind that we're kind of like teenagers with sex. But we're pretty clumsy at it sometimes. So there's an element of that, and there's an element of not losing track of that very basic KPI. Nadim, if you're around, I'm sorry, I do ask my clients what they think about what I'm doing, particularly with their data, because it's theirs.
I agree with both. The experience, I don't expect the customers to love their banks, but they recommend the banks and they are proud when something goes well. And they say that, you have a problem, just call my banker because he will take care of it. I completely agree with you. And sometimes we forget that the time goes on and we try not to revalidate or at least to see. Is that a matter of trust, Sérgio? Do we still trust, or there is an act? Because we addressed that. You were not here because we just last-minute invitation, so you were not attending the previous sessions. But one of the things and the elements that we said was the trust is critical. Either you trust or you don't trust. So either you never read all the terms and conditions, but you train to trust. Do you think that we still, as João mentioned, we went through a period, but people keep trusting the bank and keep saying that, keep my data in the vault?
Well, I think that the trust is something that we need to get every day. So we need to build the type of service, the type of communication, the type of products and interactions that build this trust. I don't think that's a question of having an equity that you tend to spend or do not spend. Or I think that's something that all our process must be designed so that we are always striving to get it today. So I think that's not that should be the position that we go on. And I would say that one of the issues, the main driver for all this data usage inside the bank. I think that one of the main KPIs, it's also it's the business success of this. It's pretty much obvious, but when you start considering all the data and you talk to data scientists and the people inside that are working on these models, you sometimes forget that the model is part of an entire process, and it only works if you are able to build and act on it and then get the results, and this must be part of a feedback loop. And this is something that really it's kind of obvious, and it's a reason to why don't this is not done every time. But the reality is that you don't go to at the same speed across all of this. It's not, you have data, you have models, but you also have systems, you have process, you have people, and all of this must work together to make sure that in the end the data is put to the use in terms of the business driver. And I think that is being able to complete this loop that will allow us to give a service that provides some confidence and some trust to our customers. So we really need to, as the Ricardo from Revolut mentioned, turn our every area in terms of same type of capability of data science, because data is part of the process, so you have to be able to use it every time. So
that is definitely, and I think that as banking, and I always believe there was a conversation that probably with both of you already, that I know the bank knows more about me than anyone else. They know how much I make every month. They know where I travel. They know where I spend in restaurants. They know if I go to and I put gas or not put gas. So, is that can be broken? Is that can we ask customers to leverage on that? Is that a strategy too?
Yeah, and I think going back to the question of what's the KPI, right? And I'm going to say something very cheesy now here. It's what is the value that we are giving to customers? What's the value? So I see data, particularly in the consumer segment, but also with companies, as a trade, right? It's a deal, right? You give me data, and I'm going to give you something back. Am I going to give you something back that is good enough, that is going to be valuable enough for you to trust me with your data? And if we're doing that, then I think we're good, right? It's a good trade. We're happy, and you keep giving me data, and I'll give you value back. Now, this is easier said than done, right? On one hand, well, we need to be able to give that value, right? But also, we need to find a way to almost psychologically inside the banks really drive ourselves to do that, right? And for example, you went quickly to say business value of data, and I think as bankers we are often trained to do the financial business case for stuff, as opposed to I'm going to trust that I'm going to give value to customer, and in the long run that's going to work out, right? And I'm going to be able to quote unquote monetize that at some point, right? And if you think about the things that are difficult for us to do, going back to your previous question about how do we compare ourselves to fintechs and how, and one thing we have difficulty to match is our business model, right? We need to be able to demonstrate profits at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, and so we don't have a VC backing us, ad eternum until we are sold out, right? It's a different model, and so we tend to be constantly thinking about how do we monetize this short term? How do we make money right now? And I think because of that, we end up losing the sight that this is a long run game, right? This is a long game where we build trust, we keep exchanging, we keep doing this exchange, data against value, but I think it's going to be inevitable, right? Because the way banking is going, again, particularly in the consumer side, our ability to monetize with the traditional levers of interest rates and so on, is diminishing so fast that with negative interest rates and everybody has free accounts and all of that, that we need to find other ways of kind of monetizing this thing, right? And this exchange might be a fruitful one, right? I mean, talk about one of the wealthiest companies in the world, Google, right? They do this exchange all the time. That's how they make money, right? And still, people give them data for free. They give value back with great maps and great search and whatnot. And everybody wins, right?
Anyway, and we have one thing that one bad apple can destroy a business model. Differently than if I position on Facebook an advertising or something to sell, and if I don't sell it, too bad, I just move on. Here, no, if you give a bad decision, if you give a bad or a positive negative or a negative positive, will impact a lot on us, and also we have to explain. So I think it's something that we cannot cope. We, being a banking industry, you cannot cope on that. It's not just try it hard, convert as much as possible. It's something. Can you stick a value? It's difficult to bring the value. I think that's like the brands. We can never know the value of a brand until you buy the company, because then you write it in the balance sheet because it's just paid for. Is that a way? Can we just? What are your beliefs in terms of the value of data? Is that something that concerns you when we invest and we spend?
Yeah.
Anti-money laundering, because this is a paradise for any data science. We have anti-money laundering, impairment, risk, fraud. We have all the components of all the models in terms, but budgets are budgets. We cannot keep on.
For sure, and coming back to the question of those more business KPIs, for sure we can measure impact whenever we apply machine learning models to augment automation through robotization. For sure we can, for instance, even recently we developed, we really reinvent our propensity models for consumer lending with machine learning and real-time data, and we gain significant uplifts and much better Gini that translated in 15% gains in sales. So for sure that in a discretionary way, you can start summing up. But I also believe, like João was saying, that it's also, you have to believe on this and do a more long-term investment and keep a long-term view on this. One of the most important aspects for me is really trust, and it's what can distinguish our banks, traditional banks, with these new digital challenger banks. They also get a lot of data. This is the reality. They also are expanding our offer and sometimes becoming more like us. So we have to run and become also more like them. But we have this amazing value of trust of clients across all generations, including millennials. So becoming very committed with transparency, with giving control to the client on how they want us to use the data and when to use, and then understanding the value that the clients are ready to actually give to the use of data we give is fundamental. And here I would introduce something that I think is interesting. We are talking about data just in a quantitative way. I think one of the most important levers is actually to join quantitative analytics with qualitative research and have joint teams with mathematicians, but also sociologists, psychologists, for instance, even to understand what is really the perceived value of clients. And whenever we now talk about open banking, and we know that one of the biggest risks is that the glue of a daily banking relationship is becoming weak with PSD2 and all the open banking. So having a very strong daily banking relation is very important with our clients. And for that, we need, for sure, to understand what is the value proposition for the client. And here, I believe that quantitative analytics will not be enough. We will need to join this other perspective of qualitative analytics. And I know because we've done 3 years ago a big project in Poland with behavior segmentation and then mass personalization applied through the digital channels. And the gains we got across 2 years, 3 years are really amazing. So you really get uplifts in terms of frequency of interactions, more relations, people willing to share data. So the value is there for sure. You can quantify as we go in specific use cases. I believe it's important to define targets for each of use cases and get very focused. But there is also a build-up that starts to accrue as you add more capabilities. And whenever we talk then about these big players and GAFAs and so on, I think another thing that is very important is for us to get the capabilities to gain agility and then to be able to turn to one side or to the other in a very fast way.
Let me perhaps pick up on your question on a different angle. I absolutely agree with what Maria José has been saying, and I think we've been paying a lot of attention to, where data takes us in our relationship with our customers. That's obviously where the value is coming from. So there, it's pretty legitimate that a lot of our attention, a lot of our focus is in that bit of what data means to organizations, to the way we behave in the market. There's another element, and I'm going to turn a little bit more boring here, so bear with me for a couple of seconds. The topic for this debate is data the new gold, and I'm sure that if there are people in the room that are actually acting as data scientists, who are actually dealing with analytics labs, who are actually an integral part of analytics labs or teams in any team, or actually partners with banks, you do feel a little bit like a miner sometimes, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're sweaty, you're dirty, and you're not sure you come up with any solid piece of gold. And there's a huge element of value capturing in addressing that, because the way we deal with data in our organizations is heavy, is painstaking, and it's costing us a heck of a lot of money. And that has to do with the fact that we're so fascinated with the upside of introducing more data, more clever data into the customer relationship that we're often not dealing with the fact that we use data throughout the whole organization all of the time. We use data in the way, our compliance looks at what, the clever things we're trying to do with our client. Compliance is going to be looking at them, and they're actually going to be looking at them in the long run, on every single transaction. And they're doing it painstakingly. And if you're running an analytics lab, then you're trying to put together the whole chain that goes from getting every silo of data, because guys, come on, we're not going to lie about it and say that we all have perfect data lakes, right? It's still quite the challenge to, where the hell is that piece of data I need? I know someone mentioned it to me the other day, but I just can't find it right now. Someone else owns it. So the whole thing from, where the hell is that piece of data to, is the guy at the front office, or is, the development pathway for my app ready to take on, is my full circuit designed so that, I get the data, I do something smart with it, and I, deliver it to the client in a way that actually renders value. That these days is painstaking, and it's costing us a lot of money. It's effectively costing us a lot of money. It's a lot of people doing duplicate jobs. It's a lot of people messing around with data that then needs to be corrected. It's a lot of people reporting this data, because this is banking, right? This is tremendously regulated. Data consistency costs us a lot of money. So if you're a data scientist and you're coming out at the end of the day feeling sweaty and dirty like a miner, you're mining gold. And there's a big chunk of value that has to do with.
But that's why I believe we cannot keep doing the same thing we used to do, and that's why this investment in technology, that's now it's much easier than it was even just a couple of years ago, and can be phased, is so fundamental, because we have to do things in a different way. And then suddenly the reality changes. It's not so sweaty, and you get really outcome.
Agreed, particularly if you add onto it the governance layer. I think I totally agree. My experience tells me that just the technology does not get us there. There's a tremendous element of governance.
I think that listening to you reminds me one story that was true story that happens to me. That not the data scientist, by that time it was not a data scientist, but someone that was caught on a money laundering, and there was a transaction of 300K, and what astonished me is that when the officer that was in charge of money laundering said that, oh, it's okay, the money is good, you can throw it away. So exactly that. So instead of passing it to private banking or to marketing, the only purpose of the money laundry, if it's the money, it's clean or not. If it's dirty, it's a need and it's a good. If not, you throw it away. And I think that for the audience, you say that, from what I got from your opinion, is build to last and build to reuse in terms of data. So don't waste just for the one purpose, but always feel that you have to catalog, you can reuse it and reuse it and reuse it for different purpose. It's a good recommendation when building a model.
And build data assets for that, right?
Yeah. Optimized. Do you also share the same views in terms of the dirty mining and going?
I would add that if banks do have a lot of data on our systems, and we have been collecting for years for either regulatory or operational uses. And if we were a tech company, we would have a multi-billion-dollar valuation because the market would be betting that we would find a way to monetize this information. And the fact is that a lot of it, we can't do it for regulatory, for privacy, for a lot of reasons and good ones. But some of them we can do, and there is some way to turn, in fact, this data into some new processes and services. So a lot of this has to do with the way that we are focused on this laundry and risk management, and not trying to look at it in terms of the positive benefits that it can have. I think that's, and even if when you talk about privacy, because this is also a big issue regarding not only data but all the aspects of relationship, is that banks here have a very good starting point, because I think that we're seeing the limits of the use of data that with all the problems with Facebook, Google, and all the stories you heard about the trading data for services that sometimes are not what you think they are, and we are seeing the way that the clarification about the rules on this are trying to clarify who is on the data, what can people do with it, what are the consents and informed decisions about it. And so the market is changing also on this. And banks are also good in working on these clear rules and ground-based. So I think we're a good starting point on these areas also.
Yeah. I don't know, João, if you want to add something, or we invite the audience to place any questions. I don't know, we have 10 minutes.
I was just a reaction, right? We were, for 45 minutes, talking a lot about some pretty grim difficulties and whatnot. Yep. So let me try to make this exciting, right? Because I think there's a pitch, particularly for data scientists that want to work with really cool things. There's a pitch to be done for working in banking, right? Because we said it many times now, right? We live in a whirlpool of data. Some of it is messy and whatnot, and you get dirty, but it's great. It's a lot of it. And we can do a lot of things with it, particularly things that add value to customers, things that are good to society, things that are helpful. And a lot of people get excited about that. So that's one. Secondly, we as banks, there are many things we cannot do compared to fintechs, but there are a lot of things we can do. There's nothing standing in the way of us, for example, using the best technology, using the best tools, best open source software and whatnot to do the work we need to do. That is exciting for people that want to work in data science. For example, at Novo Banco, we see data science, as many of our disciplines in digital transformation, as a top competition sport, right? Where you need to compete at the highest level, and so you get the best conditions to do that, right? The best tools, you need to get access to the communities that you're part of, if you want to contribute back with open source code, if you want to contribute back with articles, if you want to go to meetups, all of that is possible. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. And finally, we could work, and we can work, and we are working on some fantastic use cases, right? We talk a lot about fraud detection and all of that, and I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff to be done there, right? But we can also start tackling things like how do you really personalize every single person getting a different proposition at any given point in time that adds value to that person, right? So it's beyond segmentation, it's absolute personalization. We can do that, right? We can, for example, in Portugal, we are blessed by many things, but we are not blessed with our language in many respects, right? So there's still a lot of stuff to be done with natural language processing in Portuguese from Portugal, right? We can do that. So there are many problems to be solved, many problems that only, frankly, banking in Portugal can solve them, because otherwise nobody else is going to be interested in doing that. And so it's a great place to work if you're a young data scientist, and come talk to me if you want.
Audience, any questions? We have the banks here attending to receive your questions or address to any issue, please. Yeah.
Thank you.
Pitch. HR
I was training it for like half an hour before. Thanks.
Anyone wants to address something or want to share something or a good or a bad experience on data with banking, just for us to have some learnings and to share some knowledge among ourselves? Or we are all ready to go home and go for the weekend and tired for a long day at Nova? Yes, please.
Tech companies can, like to create some added value, but there is other value that can be created, and this value is for the society. So it's actually new knowledge, and I'm talking about scientific knowledge and academic knowledge as well. So what is the status right now in Portugal in terms of cooperations between banks and academia to do research using this data?
Any of you?
I'm happy to take that on. Just because one of the first things. So I'm also new to, or came back recently to the country, and one of the first things I did even before having a formal data science team, was trying to set one up and hire and whatnot. And so I went to see a bunch of universities and places like Tech and so on. And there's a lot of open opportunities to do that. Of course, each academia will have different, or each university will have different agendas. I personally found, sorry about that, Lisbon. I personally found great receptivity in Braga and Porto. Great ability to start things there, and we're actually in the starts of doing some things together, right? And there are ways of anonymizing data, blurring it, whatnot, that can still make the data useful for knowledge building purposes without divulging anything that is private, right?
We have the two ways, even.
Yeah, you put it in such a broad way that I feel a little bit of a loss in answering, but there are so many things happening there. We're definitely collaborating with academia at different levels, being it getting people to come join us, or just on site working with them. Then again, I think João just universities in Portugal these days have pretty different personas, right? Have pretty different attitudes towards the corporate world, towards to what extent you want to have your people join the corporate world and interface with the corporate world. But there's a lot happening in the interface with the students, in the interface with the faculty. We're having this tremendously interesting experience right now where we have faculty for some of the leading universities in Portugal join our advisory councils for things such as digital transformation, because we do feel that they're bringing in knowledge and it's important to have it at the highest decision level. I think the thing that probably works in a less interesting way is when someone comes to us and just says, well, I'm doing my PhD and I need this bunch of data. That's kind of you know what, I can open up and I can get some time from my people to dump a lot of data on you, and we still do get that. And that's not very rich. So that's...
Sorry to interrupt. I was thinking about more what I call win-win sort of questions. So questions that researchers it can be valuable in a sense that are new questions to be answered, that at the same time can be important for like the data providers. So that's the sort of interaction I hope to actually...
So I believe really what is more common is what was just talked about, so having students working on our project. The reverse side of it, I think we are in the very beginning, and I have experience over the market where it was really much more advanced, and I think there is a way to go on that direction. But having winning, like you are saying, for instance, we have been talking with one of the universities to develop advanced classification algorithms that seems to actually serve the interests of both sides, and maybe something will be born from that. But there is definitely a way to go on that direction, I believe.
Can you turn on the sound on the mic?
Okay. Hi. I have a question. Not sure you can reply to it, but my question is: does any of you have an account at one of the Challengers banks, such as Revolut or N26?
Yes.
And
Every
how does
single
that?
one of them.
You have to keep them very
Every
close.
single one of them. What silly question is that? Yeah.
And how do you use that experience and try to incorporate that into your own banks? Because I mean, Revolut and these type of banks, they do pretty interesting stuff, and it's an amazing customer experience. And what it takes me, I'm a client of one of the banks. I'm not going to say which one of your banks, not but it's a very different experience. And so I'm just considering how senior people in banks actually, take that experience and try to incorporate it into your own organizations.
Maybe I can also answer first to that. So, of course, I have accounts in many of them, not only Revolut, Monzo, Starling, etc. And of course, they are a very good source of inspiration. Now, we had an interesting experience. We changed our app some months ago. And I knew it would not be extremely easy because you got hundreds of thousands of clients that are used to an experience that for what they have been using is fantastic, and they are used to do that in the very same way. So when you try to change it in a more radical way and in a more like one of these challenger banks, and we got inspiration from several of them and also from our new team of designers, you have actually to balance both sides. There are things you can for sure import, but you have also to keep some connection with the backstory, right? But then you start evolving and people start to get used to a simpler experience, and actually you get much more similar to what these new players are offering.
Yeah. Consumers never want to be pushed. I remember when I was at Microsoft and it was the move to Windows 8, Windows 10, fantastic. All the guys say, I hate this, because when you move to a newcomer, you take the decision on learning. And that makes all the difference. Yeah. And that's the problem. If you push someone, it's the challenge.
I would also... Sorry, please.
No. At the end, I was going just to say, and coming to this story of KPIs that we talked some time ago, I think what we really need to measure is, and again, data is essential here, is that in advance you have to set up a really strong data capability to understand how customers are reacting, and not only the end result. Of course, we saw very good growth of transactional usage of our app, etc., etc. But you have also to understand where customers are stopping, why they are stopping, how these actually differentiate depending on the customer segment in terms of age or in terms of behavior, and then start working from that.
Yeah, and I would also add that we have the very big challenge also of having a long tail of customers with very different digital profiles. So because most of our customers that are coming to digital are not early adopters. They came 20 years ago. So the ones that are growing are the customers which are not digital natives. And the challenges of designing for this type of customers, it's a little bit different, because the type of language that you need to use, the type of interface and the use that, if you are used to technologies, you think it's easy. But for a lot of these profiles, you have to get, either you get a lot of interfaces, which is costly, but if you try to do a limited number of interactions, you have to keep it to a standard where you're sure on your tests that everyone is but I think everyone is looking at not only the newcomers, but also all the benchmarks. I think that's, we need always to be aware of that.
Yeah. Just to add two more small things. One, building on this, one thing to think about is how do we personalize experience so it feels like a Revolut to a young person like yourself. It feels like something else to a old person out in the agriculture or outskirts of the city or whatnot. The second thing is, personally, we learn a lot from, not only from the designs and from the products, but particularly from the process, right? So we learn a lot from how they take service design to the next level, right? And the type of ethnographical research that they do with customers and so on. Some of these startups are really, really good at that. Some of them will do it almost intuitively, because the founder, like Steve Jobs, was a natural for that. But some of them are very purposeful about that, right? And they have very sophisticated design teams, research teams, etc. And frankly, we as banks, we are not gifted with fantastic intuition, so we need to do the hard work of just doing that kind of research, that kind of design. And we're learning from that, for sure.
Oh, go for it. Working? Yeah. I have a question. We have been talking about data the last 2 days. Actually, Miguel touched in this point. I have a curiosity. Do you have data on your balance sheet? And if you don't, have you ever thought about it? I mean, you have a database license fee, either if it's empty or with all the transactions you have, and you've been talking about monetizing. Have you thought about that, or did you discuss that on your board meetings?
I get the feeling that there's an element of accounting creativity that would not be fully appreciated. So the answer, I think it's yes and no, and it must be the same to all of us. Yes, we do have data in our balance sheets. We all have some form of value appropriation, some asset that we have registered that's within our balance sheet that we are, we're treating very conventionally. But we do have it in our balance sheet because there's an intrinsic element of the value it has, the way it integrates our product offering, the way it integrates our client relationship. So it is there in a way. If you're asking me if I have a line there that says data, no, we don't, and I don't think either of us, none of us does. But so I'm not sure I'm addressing the real question behind it. If it is an obvious value acknowledged in the bank's valuation, yes. If it sits in our assets in a way that's visible, yes. If we are tremendously creative about it, we don't really feel the need to do that.
And the value, it's not the data itself, right? It's how we apply and we generate value from time to time, right? And this for sure will be valued by investors and other stakeholders as time goes by, and we demonstrate we are able to leverage that.
What? Be an asset or?
Oh, that's such a...
Or alone.
Such a clever
Alone.
question. I'm sure our clients will decide on that.
Exactly, clients will decide.
It depends if you pay for it.
It applies to so many things within a banking relationship. Yeah. It applies to trust. Where would you put trust?
And whether the models will evolve to data exchanges with blockchain, for instance. So.
I mean, I wasn't criticized. I don't know any company that does that, but trust, I know it's very difficult to measure the value of data, but trust, a little bit different, because if you imagine you lost all your data, you will have a tremendous issue in the bank. You know, with trust, it's the same. But I mean.
So let me tell you a story. I'm with Caixa, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you will all have forgotten what happened back in 2016, 17, etc. But we could measure it in the balance sheet, and it was all about trust. So, you know, that was why I was going back to how do you trust? How do you treat trust? How do you treat data? How do you treat all of that? Because that's all in the sphere of how do your customers look at you, and how do they look at what they give to you in confidence. They give us our money, but they give us a bit more. So that's where I was going, but this is definitely turning end of Friday, late going into the weekend.
Thank you.
Let me put an end of it. I will have to thank you a lot for you to be here after a long week and to share with us all the thoughts and what you've been doing. Thank you, the audience, for the questions, and talk to you soon. Thank you.